It's chat time with Chunk and Cucumber and your host, Dino.
Hi, everybody.
What up? Hello. That's how I say good morning now.
It is. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Chat Time. I am your host, Dino, as always. And with me, we have Chunk and Brian today.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Finally got rid of cucumber.
Yeah.
It's about time.
For now, it never sticks. But we have with us a special guest. Everybody say hello to Scott Rogers.
Hello.
Hello, Scott.
Hi,
Roger.
world. Hi, Twitch world. How's everybody doing?
Oh, hey, it's me. Yes, Beard in the Pen. It's me. Welcome, Scott. We're really excited to have Scott on here. Scott is, among other many things, a board game designer and a friend to the channel. So we are real excited to have you on the show, Scott. You have a lot of stories. We already heard some of them before we even went live, and I'm real excited to hear more.
Yeah, and if you guys are longtime watchers, Scott was a guest of us way back in the day. First year at Perception Studio, he came and did a studio day with us.
Yeah, that was great. I had such a good time, and I still talk about that day. I'm looking forward to the day where I can come back and we can play more games in person.
Yeah, at our permanent studio.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm very excited. No more, closet, right? That little
exactly.
tiny space you guys had.
That's pretty much what it was.
Yeah. Now they're legit.
Actually, I was really impressed at how great a studio you guys had for such a tiny little space. It was great, but I'm really looking forward to seeing the new studio.
Yeah. Well, that was the studio we used to just rent out just for those days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you didn't even see the garage we were stuck in before.
Yeah, like a literal closet.
Right.
Oh, man. What's today, Garmin with the Garage? It's Thursday, and
the 19th.
we're doing a show. Is it really the 19th?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it
we're
is.
just months gone.
I feel like the whole summer went so slow,
What
and
summer?
now everything's speeding up like really quickly.
Yeah. October just flew by. November's flying by. They're not
Yeah.
letting it. 2020 is not letting us enjoy the holidays.
Well, it's like when you're in it, it feels super slow, but then you look back at it and you're like, wait, what happened? It went by
Yeah.
super fast. But inside of it, it's like it's so slow.
And that's every sexual encounter Chunk had.
Yep.
Ryan's upset. Yay. Well, welcome. Well, let's start off today, like we do every day, every week, with but how do you feel? We have a transition that we're not going to see, Scott.
All right.
There it is.
I love it. I like pointing it out to the audience that we don't know what they're seeing. Great. So, but how do you feel is where we describe how we're feeling using other things to be vague. Today, I want us to describe how we're feeling using board game pieces. Any board game piece that you feel like today, and why.
I feel like the iron from Monopoly.
Okay,
Because
why?
it's like somebody just...
You not feeling too good, Brian?
It's early. I don't get up early.
That's true.
Not anymore since I have nothing better to do around here.
So really, you feel like the board of Monopoly because you've been ironed.
Yeah, pretty much. People walk all over me.
That's right. Building hotels on your head.
Yeah, I hate it. Do not pass go.
Do not.
Do not collect 200.
Well, you get $200. That's something.
Yeah. True. I think I'm feeling like a generic meeple, like just like a plain like human shaped meeple that is like maybe blue. I don't know. I haven't woken up yet, so I feel like my personality is still loading.
You need the loading wheel.
I do.
You haven't been screen printed yet.
Yeah, exactly.
You're waiting for the tampo to come down and press your face onto you.
That's exactly right. I'm a meeple that hasn't been printed yet, just waiting on the line, waiting for it everything else to be attached. I like that.
I feel like a Trivial Pursuit little cheese wheel thingy, little pie thingy, but the empty one. Like I feel like I'm trying real hard. I'm trying real hard to keep getting things and information and shit, and I'm just not able to pull it up.
Well, Chunk, you know you can play that game without the cheese wheel, right?
But then how do you keep track?
You just don't. You just either you win or you don't. You don't need that board. That you're charging you like, 20 extra bucks for stuff you don't need. You just need the cards.
Yeah, but if I have such a short attention span, I would lose track of where I was. I need every help that I can get.
How about just hang on to the cards and whoever has the most that when you guys get bored wins?
Oh yeah.
I like that.
makes
Board
sense.
game designer, always thinking.
I'm gonna take you with me when I go shopping for games next.
Well, yeah. I have some great recommendations. I regularly Sherpa people with board games. I have a lot of friends that say, I don't know anything about board games. And I'm like, that's okay. I know a lot about board games.
Come on in.
Come on in. Yeah, everybody is welcome. We want everybody at the table because the more people that play board games means that I get to play more board games with them.
Man, this guy sounds like Danny.
There's a reason why we get along.
Yeah. That's awesome. Aaron Luzu says, I'm the little sorry piece because I just feel like a little bloop that keeps getting sent back to the beginning and doesn't know what's happening.
No. Yeah.
A bloop. Is that the technical definition of that piece?
The bloop.
A bloop?
It's usually a pawn or a mover, but I like bloop. I think I'm going to start using that.
Yeah, me too.
What about you, Ryan and Scott?
Let's see. I am the Jade Elephant figure from the Jumanji board game. And I'm just continuing to wait to get to the center of the jungle so I can yell Jumanji.
I was gonna say if you're the Jade Elephant in Jumanji, that means you are a beautifully crafted piece in a really terrible game.
Yep. That explains Wednesdays. Yeah.
I love that. That's Ryan. Keep that. That's awesome. You are a beautifully crafted piece in a terrible game. Oh man, I feel like that's just us in 2020 right now. Beautifully crafted pieces in a terrible game.
Yeah.
I love it. What about you, Scott? What are you feeling today?
I feel like one of my placeholder pieces and one of my prototypes, because eventually I know that it's going to be better and it's going to upgrade and it's going to be beautiful, and maybe somebody with more talent and skill is going to make a beautiful version of it. But right now it's a placeholder. It's doing what it needs to do. It's still functional, but eventually it's going to improve.
I like that. I like that.
Deep. Dig it.
Yeah, Scott's
It's
bringing in the.
Yeah, maybe too deep for 9 in the morning.
No, you're good. I mean, yeah, a little bit, but it's fine. You're just operating on a higher level than us right now. I also have not had coffee, so there's
I
also a
have.
reason.
So that's the difference.
Excuse me. What is Riss Awesome says? I feel like a domino because I'm so tired I could fall over at any moment, and I am nothing without my friends. Also, pizza is never a bad idea. That's good. That's awesome.
That is good.
Well, yay, Scott. We barely talked about you, who you are. So give us a little quick intro of who you are, that we can get going and talk more about it.
Oh my gosh, a quick intro, you said.
Maybe not that quick.
Yes.
All right. My name is Scott Rogers. I am by trade a game designer. I have been so for over 25 years, hence the beard. I started as a video game designer. I designed many what are called AAA games, many of which you have heard of, if not played, if not loved. And then I was very fortunate enough to give a talk. Well, I wasn't fortunate enough to give the talk. I gave the talk at a game developers conference, which led to two important things. One was a publisher reached out to me to write a book which I've written a few now. The main one is called Level Up. It's a book on video game design, although there's a lot of other things it could apply to. The other was that the talk was about game design in Disneyland, and that led to a job at Disney Imagineering, which I did for about 5 years. I was designing games and experiences for the guests at the park, particularly in Anaheim. I'm in Los Angeles area. And then after that ended, I ended up going into teaching, which is I teach game design at a place called the New York Film Academy and occasionally at University of Southern California. And for my free time, which I'm honestly surprised I have any, I design board games, 2 of which have been published. The first was called Ray Guns and Rocket Ships, which was featured in a film that came out this year called Game Master, which is a documentary film about 5 of us, different game designers, kind of our journey making our games. And my most recent game is called Pantone the Game. It's a party game based on the Pantone color system. So if you are a color system nerd and you like party games, and it plays pretty well over Zoom. That's kind of me in a very small nutshell.
Anything else? Jeez.
Yeah.
Man, I was about to walk out of here.
I do several podcasts. I do one called Ludology,
of course,
which is about the kind of an academic look at game design. And I do another with my daughter called Fillery and Father, which is kind of one of those watch the show and then talk about it afterwards shows about the TV show The Magicians.
Magicians, yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's a cool list.
Yeah, and I do comic books, but I haven't done that in a while.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
What is one of the AAA games that I probably could have most likely played? And then what is one of the games at Disney that if I visited, I probably also could have played?
Gotcha. So the game that you probably have at least heard of, AAA game, is called God of War. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I never heard of that.
Yeah. All right.
That's amazing. I love that game.
That's awesome.
I worked on that game. I did the first level, which is the Hydra monster. I did all the bosses.
My favorite level.
Yeah, it's a good one. And then I did. There's a bit at the end. If you're good, there's a thing that's called the Challenge of the Gods. I also designed that. Wow. Then the thing that I did at Disney or helped do at Disney, the project that I worked on eventually became the infrastructure for what's called Disney Play. So you've done that, all the hardware and a lot of the initial game ideas came from my group. I got to install hardware in every attraction in Disneyland and several in California Adventure. I always tell people I've been to the top of the Matterhorn and the basement of the Haunted Mansion.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
Yep.
By the way, Guillermo the Grouch says, "Oh my God, I read your book for a game design class. Best assignment
Nice.
ever."
Yeah, I'm really proud to say that a lot of different programs use it for their game design programs. So that's awesome. Thank you for even though probably your teacher made you buy it. Thank you for buying it.
Worth it.
And I always tell people that that it is the best video game design book you will ever read with a chili recipe in it.
Wait, it's not Walt's chili, is it?
No, it's my own. It's actually, so depending on the edition, it's in its 2nd edition. So depending on the edition that you've bought, there's a different chili recipe.
That's cool.
That's kind of cool.
Now I'm gonna have to buy both editions.
Exactly. Yeah, if you want to get the full recipe book. Actually,
that's funny.
I mean, that's something that I try to do with. Hopefully, one of these days we'll do a 3rd edition. There's so much stuff that has happened since the last one came out. And of course the chili recipe will change. I'm thinking maybe a white chicken chili this time. But also I always update. There's a lot of illustrations that I've drawn in it, as well as references to, I try to keep the references current. So whenever 3rd edition happens, there'll be a lot of work for me to do to update it.
That's really cool. So you also are a chili cook.
Yeah. Well, I dabble. I've won a couple of awards, chili cook-off awards.
Yeah, dabbling.
Dabble.
But I'm not like a professional, like gung-ho. I don't have my
Just
own.
award winner, that's all.
That's all. No big deal.
They were small. They were small contests. They weren't huge, but I did win them. So
That's awesome. I'm gonna go back before we go to actually. Let's finish the chili topic because I just want to know. So, where is it? Just something that you started doing? Is it something you picked up from family?
no, it actually. Well, I mean, the cooking from family, of course, but the chili actually refers to something I mentioned in the book about game design, because I see game design as like making chili. You have to have a plan, a recipe. You take a wide variety of ingredients, and it kind of almost doesn't matter always what they are. They just need to taste good together. And then good chili requires careful preparation. And then you stew it all together. And a good cook always tests it as you go. So you want to taste it as you go. And then hopefully everything blends together, and with some heat, which is usually from playtesting, in the end, you'll end up with something delicious.
I love that. I like that. I like that it's not just like a chili recipe; that it's actually a metaphor for what you do. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Now going back, what got you into game design in general? Like, what got you into that field?
So I joke, and it's not really a joke, it's a truth. I tell people I was discovered in a coffee shop like Lana Turner.
Okay.
So I went to college and studied film production. I focused on screenwriting, and I double majored. I have a degree in illustration, and I thought I was going to be doing comic books. And then I grew up in San Diego, so I would go to Comic-Con every year, and I would meet guys like Jack Kirby and Carl Barks and John Romita and, all these kind of legends of the comic industry. And they would always tell me how horrible it was to work in comic books. So they kind of scared me off from doing comics. So I was in school doing my illustration degree, and about my junior year, I had a lot of friends that were also in the film department, because I like film, and I noticed that all my friends in film were getting internships at Paramount and 20th Century Fox and all the studios around town, where all of my art friends were working at like grocery stores and Tower Records.
You're like,
and I went, yeah, exactly. Which one of these professions is going to get me a job out of college? So I decided, I loved film, and I was always interested, and I always thought that maybe I'd do special effects. So I applied and got into the film department there. So I was double majoring, finishing my art degree and getting a film degree. And I really gravitated towards screenwriting because I like storytelling and writing and things like that. And so I ended up graduating, and then I was supposed to get an internship with Amblin, the Spielberg's company.
Yeah, wow.
But a hurricane wiped out the sets of Jurassic Park, and it ate up all the funding for my internship. So instead, I got a job doing animation at a real sketchy little animation house in LA. And as you creative types probably know, there is a tradition in the animation industry, only really one tradition, which is at every Christmas time, all the animators are fired. And so, so I was unemployed, and a friend of mine came into a coffee shop that I was hanging out at, and I was drawing in my sketchbook, and he said, "Hey, Scott, you know how to draw, right?" And I went, "Yeah."
That's how it always starts.
Drawing right now. And he said, "Do you know how to draw on a computer?" And I go, "Well, what do you mean?" Because my brother had a Macintosh when I was a kid, and I learned how to use Photoshop like from version 1.0. So I said, "Well, I can draw things on a computer. What program do you use?" And he mentioned something called Deluxe Paint, and then another one called Deluxe Animation, which were old school PC programs. And I said, "Well, I don't have a PC. I don't know how to use those." And he said, well, that's okay. I work for this company and we make video games and we're looking for artists. Why don't you come to my house for the next 2 weeks and make a portfolio? And when you're done, you can come in and interview for the job. And I go, that's great. That's a very generous offer. I'll do that. So I spent 2 weeks and I learned these programs and I drew some pictures and animated some characters and learned how to tile. I would watch, I would freeze Sonic the Hedgehog on my TV set and then look at how they would create the tiling for the backgrounds. This was back in the SNES Genesis days. Like I said, old. Anyway, so I went in for the job and they said, well, we really like you and we like your work, but unfortunately we just hired somebody for that position, so we don't have a job for you. And that company was a little company called Silicon and Synapse. Have you guys ever heard of that company before?
No.
Probably not, because they went to change their name because Silicon and Synapse is a pretty awful name. And they changed it to one that you might have heard of called Blizzard.
Yeah, no big deal.
So if I had been hired, I probably would have been like the 16th employee of Blizzard. But unfortunately that didn't work out. But I did use that portfolio to get a job at another place, and I worked there for about 3 years. A couple of places for about 3 years as an artist. And one day I was listening to the game designers talking. I was doing 16-bit art, which is some people do a gorgeous job making 16-bit art, but for me it was like laying bathroom tile. It was a very painful, laborious process, and I peeked my head up over the cubicle, and all these game designers were yucking it up and having a good time, and I'm like, those guys are having way more fun making games than I am. That's what I want to do. And so I literally marched over and said, hey, how do I become a game designer? I like doing art, but I think I'd be better at doing what you guys are doing. And one of the designers, a fellow named Bill Anderson, said, all right, I'll cut you a deal. If you do all my art for me, like essentially you draw my game design maps and storyboard gameplay and things like that, I'll teach you how to make games, how to design games. And I said, sure, that sounds like a good deal for me. I'm still employed as an artist, but now I've got kind of this side project I'm working on. And at a point, eventually that company went under. And there was a point in my life where I'm like, well, I could keep going as an artist, or I could keep going, or I could try to apply as a game designer. And I said, the heck, I'll go for game design. And I ended up getting hired at Namco. And my first game that I designed was Pac-Man World for the PlayStation 1.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it all worked out in the end.
Yeah. It all worked out.
That's cool.
That's really cool. Oh, man. That's really interesting that there were a lot of like close calls.
Oh,
and then, that's finally.
Yeah, the one of the companies I was working at while I was an artist, but essentially journeymaning, I guess, as a designer or whatever. What's it called when you are like a little apprenticing, I guess. Was on a little game called Oddworld. And so I was one of the early designers. I'm not credited on it, unfortunately. That's a whole nother story. But I was one of the early designers of Abe's Odyssey and worked with Lauren and that whole team. And it turned out to be a gorgeous game. I don't know if you guys know that game or not, but
yeah, I've heard of it. I've never played it, but
it's hard. I mean, it's not as hard as like, Dark Souls or something like that, but it's still like an early kind of hard. You got to be pixel perfect with the jumps, but it's gorgeous. It was one of the most beautiful games on the PlayStation 1.
That's awesome.
I think I'm gonna change the name of the show from Chat Time with Chunk and Cucumber to Bragging Rights with Scott Rogers.
Yeah.
That is, Chunk, that is humble brag. Thank you.
Yeah. Humble bragging rights.
Oh,
Yeah,
bragging
he
with
just
Scott
dabbles
Rogers.
in game design. It's just
just a little bit. No big deal.
No, it's been my profession. I am very proud to say that for over 25 years, I put game designer on my tax form. So
That's awesome.
I am,
That's awesome.
I am verified by the U.S. government as a game designer.
That's so cool.
I'm jealous. That's amazing.
Yeah. Quinn Rogue, welcome. You missed that we're with Scott Rogers, a game designer, video game designer, and board game designer. So we'll just say game designer. It's much easier to just say.
Yeah, game designer works.
Yeah. That's really cool. What was the hardest project as a game designer you had to work on? that like took the most stress, the most years off your life?
Well, it probably was God of War. I only worked on the game for a year. The game had already been, I think, 4 years in development by the time I got to it, and they needed kind of an injection of energy and expertise. And it was a very hard year, mostly because I had very young children at the time, and my son, who was maybe 7 or 8 months old at the time, maybe just enough to walk. So like what, 1.5 or so? I don't know if you guys have kids, but he was walking around our apartment with a picture of me just going, "Daddy, Daddy," and hearing that broke my heart. And so I was like, well, I gotta do something, because we were working 16-hour plus days on that game, and that's unfortunate. That's an unfortunate part of the culture. Animation industry is the same, and acting and filmmaking. Everybody is like running really hard because they're very excited about the project, but as a result, they tend to not take good care of themselves. And this is something that I'm constantly advising my students as they enter their careers in gaming, which is, I go, look, you guys are young. You guys have a lot of energy. You guys have no connections other than, your parents and your friends. But you have to make a life for yourself. You cannot let the company own you. You cannot let the company monopolize all of your time and all of your energy and all of your passion, because they don't care about you in the end. They're paying you, sure, but in the end, they don't care about you as an individual. I've seen people get divorced because of their time that they've spent away from home. I've seen people end up in the hospital because they worked so hard. I've actually, unfortunately, even seen people die because of they working so hard. And it's really unfortunate, and it's something that needs to change. I think the industry is now aware of it, and they kind of give it lip service. They say, "Oh, EA Spouse" and things like that. But EA Spouse was like 15 years ago, and there still hasn't been any sort of change in the industry. Now, I don't know what the answer is, other than each individual has to be mindful for themselves, to take care of themselves. Don't rely on the company to care about you in that capacity. So it's good. I understand the passion. I do it myself. I stay up till 2 a.m. working on game designs and things like that. But that said, you need to take time for yourself. Otherwise, it literally will burn you out. You will sizzle up, and they'll just be a little husk. And I've also known a lot of people that have just quit gaming because they've been burnt out. And to me, that's the biggest tragedy. Is I hate seeing somebody who is passionate about something lose that passion and then just wander off. Right? They're done. They're like, I've lost that passion for this thing I used to love. And the thing that I've been extremely fortunate about is that I've been able to do what I love for a career. And that's what I wish on everybody. I hope that whoever is out there, whatever it is that you love to do, be it making chili or making games or being a business manager to a felted friend or running a podcast or whatever, that you get to make a living at it, that you get to do it on a regular basis, because there is nothing better than doing what you love for a living.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think all of us here are pretty lucky that we get to do things that we love in some capacity. Like, it may not be like, I'm sure all of us would love to get paid to play Dungeons and Dragons all day. Like, that'd be freaking great. But at least like all we're all involved in an industry that we love, and I think we're very lucky to be able to say that for the most part. And
well, some of it is luck, but some of it is also you guys probably do a good job of balancing your work life, balance, right, between your work and your life.
We try.
And then you're probably also very very smart about what projects you take, right? That's another thing that's a huge that's why I took God of War, because I knew it was going to be a good game. And I also was very interested in the subject matter. I'm a big Greek mythology nut. So when I was like, ooh, work on an action game with Greek mythology, that's awesome. So
Show me the door.
being very selective about what you work on don't be afraid to say no to things. Your energy is your most valuable commodity, your time and energy. And so put it towards things that are worthwhile. And this sounds a little mercenary, but you should also put it towards things that you benefit from. So, when I say, hey, I worked on God of War and you guys all went, ooh, that's one of the benefits that I get from it, right? Is that I get recognition, and that allows me to open doors that otherwise other people might not have open to them.
Yeah, that's really good advice too. Is like, not just don't just take the job because it's good pay, but because you should
always get something out of a job other than pay.
Yeah. Connie Deadly Nightshade said Scott laying down some deep truths this AM. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Exactly. No, it's great. We love it. We love it. We mess around a lot on the show, so getting some nice like touching moments is good too. Breaking
good advice. Good advice.
Too. Yeah.
Hopefully it's useful advice.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. If any of you all have questions for Scott, by the way, go ahead while we're asking questions, please. Please throw them out there in the chat. But I did have a question about. Oh crap!
Somebody in the chat want to know if you were related to Steve.
Steve Rogers.
Steve Rogers.
All the time. People always call me Steve. And I also get Roger Scott a lot. That's the curse of having the dual first names.
Oh.
Right now, I mean, Rogers, I don't know anyone named Rogers, but right. People always switch it around all the time. But yes, I mean, I don't mind being associated with Steve Rogers. He's a good guy. He's doing a good job fighting the forces of evil. Yeah. And, it could be worse. I could be like, related to Deadpool or Lobo or something, right? So.
That's true. So for Disney, you said that you wrote a book, that one of your books opened that door to Disney.
Yeah.
What was that like, getting into that world of Imagineering?
So Dino, you're going to sense a pattern here, which is my whole life is constructed of very interesting stories. And so this is one of the more
exactly why I'm happy you're here.
So in 2009, I gave a talk called Everything I Learned About Level Design, I Learned from Disneyland. And you can find this talk several places. If you go on to the Game Developers Conference website, maybe one of you can look up a link and post that. That would be awesome. Yeah, and also on YouTube, it's there. I've given the talk many times over the years. It's a favorite. And even if you go to my my infrequently updated blog, which is called mrbossdesign.blogspot.com, you can find slides there about it. But anyway, essentially it shows the correlation of Disneyland and video game design. And there happened to be Disney Imagineers in the audience because they saw Disneyland on the schedule and they were like, who the hell is this guy who's talking about Disneyland? Well, he's never worked for Disney. What does he know? Well, I'm here to tell you that it is possible to be knowledgeable about something and not have to work in it. And this is something that sometimes people have a tough time remembering. I run into this all the time where people end up being experts and they're not acknowledged for that because they haven't done it. And I don't know. I mean, it helps to do it, but anyway, I'm airing grievances here. I shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, I gave this talk. The Imagineers came up to me afterwards and said, "Wow, this was a really great talk. It was you totally get what Disney is all about. We would love to have you give this talk to us on the Imagineering campus in Glendale." And I'm like, "Oh my God, this is a dream come true. I am a big Disneyland fanboy. I'm not always a Disney fan, but I adore the theme park." I grew up in San Diego. We would go to Disneyland once a year, whether we needed to or not. And then in college, I had lots of friends that were cast members, and I would always get in on their free pass. And we would, for a few years in college, Disneyland was my playground. We ran around. We did scavenger hunts even before that was a thing. We had a great time. Anyway,
that's awesome.
So So I go to Disney and I give this talk, and it's packed house and it's very well received. And they say, "Hey, how about you come back again and give this to a group within Disney called WD Pro." This is the Parks and Resorts online division. So they're the guys that handle the website. Pardon me. So I said, great, I'll do that. So I gave a talk again, another packed house. And afterwards, the fellow who ran one of the departments said, hey, can we keep in touch? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And, I was like, any opportunity to see behind the scenes. And for any of you that have visited Imagineering's headquarters in Glendale, there's several buildings, but the Flower Street building, which is the main building, that has there's like workshops where you can see, they always, like if you watch the Imagineering story, you see some of this stuff, but I would like get lost. I'd be like, oh, I got to get to a meeting. Oh, sorry, I got lost. I would wander through places because it literally is like a wizard's workshop. There are so many, art, so much art, so much amazing things going on. And I never wanted to leave. It was just a wonderful place. So I was like, wow, how can I get a job here? But I never thought game designer was something they wanted. I grew up, like as a little kid, I was like, oh, I'd love to be an Imagineer, but I'm not a roboticist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an architect. These are all skills that people, I was an okay artist, but not anywhere near the level of a Disney animator. And so I never thought it was an achievable goal. So eventually I get a phone call and it's this fellow that I kept in touch with. And he said, hey, I think I have this job that would be perfect for you. Are you interested in being a contract employee for Disney? Now, Disney, you're either a blue badge or a green badge.
Yeah.
If you're a green badge, you're a contractor. But if you're a blue badge, you're what's called a cast member, and you get all the benefits of being a cast member, including usually admission to the park. And that was my goal. I wanted to get free admission because there was nothing sweeter than going to Disneyland on Uncle Walt's money.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
That's true.
So I said, well, no, I don't want to be a contractor. I want to be a cast member. Is that an option? And the guy said, well, let me get back to you. So like 6 months went by and the guy calls me back up and he says, hey, we have a contract position of this project. I think you'd be perfect for it. I go, no, the last time we talked, I said cast member. And he goes, all right, let me get back to you. So like another week or two goes by and he calls me up and he says, I think I figured out a way to make you a cast member. Why don't you come in for an interview? And I go, when? And he goes, now. And I'm like, well, my kids were still young, but they were in like not middle school, but like grade school. So they had like from 8 a.m. till 2 or 3, before I had to get them. And fortunately, they just lived down the street. So, but I was like, oh, I just took my kids to school. Sure. If I'm back, in Thousand Oaks where I live by, 2 o'clock, I'm good. So I zip down there, I go there, I interview with all these people and I keep asking them, well, what's the job? And they go, well, we can't tell you. and they keep going, you'd be perfect for it. You'd be perfect for it. I'm like, well, what though? What am I perfect for? And I was still kind of viewing it with some suspicion. I said, well, yeah, I said, what is this job? And they'd kind of describe what it was. And I said, well, you guys work for Parks and Resorts Online, which is, the webpage, but everything you're talking about sounds like Imagineering. I go, is this an Imagineering job? And they were like, can't say anything, And one of the moment that tipped the scales for me was a fellow that I ended up becoming a really good friend with. His name's Chad Jones, and he's gone on to work for like Universal and all types of, he's a really super talented guy. He showed me a picture. One of these, we were talking earlier about pictures we're not supposed to have of Disneyland. And he showed me a picture of him with his arm draped around the redhead in Pirates of the Caribbean. And I went, if that's the opportunity afforded to me, I'm in. That's what I'm going to do. So I was in the middle of negotiating the job, which took about like 3 months. And I was actually talking to J.J. Abrams people about starting a game division with them, Bad Robot Guys. Mm-hmm. And so Disney knew that I was talking to them, and they were like, don't take any jobs. Don't take any jobs. We want you. We just got to work this out. So eventually I get a phone call from the guy, and he goes, Scott, I have good news and bad news about the job you applied for. And I'm like, all right, well, just give me the bad news. The good news, whatever, but I just want to know the bad news. And he goes, well, the bad news is the job you applied for doesn't exist anymore, which was at WD Pro. And I'm like, okay, all right, what does that mean? And he goes, well, it just means that we're going to have to hire you straight in as an Imagineer, which was like the dream for me.
I'm like,
and so I go, what's the bad news, right? That's the, that's the that's the story of how I eventually became a Disney Imagineer.
That's so cool. Yeah, I was the same way growing up. I was like, I'd love to be an Imagineer. I don't have any sort of like skills in that department, those things that they do. But like now as an adult, like I know I work with Ken Parks at Knott's Berry Farm.
Yeah.
And he did the stuff that I do, but for Imagineering. Like, so
Right.
it was really cool, and like realizing like, maybe one day I could have a role somewhere in Imagineering if I keep up things.
So one of the people on the stream, Reed, is asking a question. Have any of you used Kudos? Reed, Kudos was the project I was hired for. That was my project. So the thing that was this Disney, it's essentially became Disney Play. We had a working prototype. So I assume, Reed, you either worked for Disney and knew about it, or you have play tested it. And this was a app that you could use to essentially go on quests around Disneyland Park, and then they would end in some sort of physical experience. So we had literally built things into the. So for any of you that are Disneyland fans like myself, if you ever go to the Mickey Mouse Theater on Main Street, you'll notice that as of 2012, there was a 7th screen added to the normal 6 screens in the theater. That 7th screen was because of my project, which was you would go on a quest around Main Street. You would look at all the things Walt was interested in. You would get a virtual ticket once you had completed all those quests. It said Disneyland wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this character. Go to Main Street Cinema to find out who this is. And you would go in there and you would, on your phone, you would rip a virtual ticket, and the 6 screens that normally would show Mickey cartoons would turn off, and the 7th screen would turn on, and we would show an Oswald cartoon, which was the first time they had ever had Oswald in the park.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
That's cool.
I helped bring Oswald back into the park as part of my project. Now, we play tested this for the summer of, I want to say the summer of 2012, I think.
Well, that was for D23, right?
Yeah, it was around, but not at D23. It was actually just in the park. It was,
okay.
you just, if you happen to be wandering, and we were like, hey, grab them and let's see if they want to try this out. And you would, or you could sign up if you were an AP. And so for 3 months we had this play test running, and then I got sick. I got cancer in 2013, so I was out of commission for 8 months. And in that time, the project got canceled. I don't know if my sickness had anything to do with it. If so, sorry. But it got canceled, and then I got my department was dissolved in 2016. So that ended my relationship with Disney. But then the project got picked back up again like a year or two later by a fellow who is one of my heroes at Disney, a fellow named Jonathan Ackley, who is responsible for all of the, if any of you have done like the Pirates Adventure or the Agent P World Showcase game or Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom. Those are all his projects.
Ask about Sorcerers.
Yeah. So Jonathan Ackley is like the project manager on those. And what he was doing in Florida was what we were trying to do in Anaheim. And him and his team took Disney Play and then finished it and made it what it is, and also tied it into Galaxy's Edge and all that fun stuff.
That's awesome.
Kudos. When you were describing Kudos, that sounded a lot like the Sorcerers game over at Magic Kingdom.
It was actually very different. Sorcerers is kind of like a very low-fi Magic the Gathering game.
Yes.
Where Kudos was very much like, we were trying to make Legend of Zelda, but for Disneyland, where using the park as the world.
How fun.
And you would go around and you would get awards and you would get achievements, and those would kind of stack. And so it would track, how many times you went on Space Mountain, and you'd get achievements for that. And if you showed up on certain days, like on the Haunted Mansion's 50th anniversary would have got you an achievement. And so it just really was turning Disneyland into a living Xbox Live Arcade achievements board, but also we had these physical things that would happen. So like the theater, we had a treasure hunt that used Fortune Red, the audio animatronic, it pops out the little card that gives you your fortune. You would get a customized treasure map from him if you used him. We had a tree in Frontierland that would light up with fireflies that would kind of sing and dance. There's still things like that. Like the Disney Plus has a really nice ending to the experience that involves something in the Peter Pan queue, which was also something I had worked on. I was trying once Kudos was done, I did a lot of work on trying to make gameplay for the queues because, admittedly, some of the weights are pretty bad, like Space Mountain and Peter Pan. And so I did a lot of development of work for that, which then also got, I guess, folded into Kudos.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I always love that over in Orlando, all the queues are so much longer and more expansive, and then they put all the gaming, interactive stuff through the queues, and I always thought that was a brilliant idea.
Oh, yeah. The one in Soaring, I think, is my favorite. It's the one where you use kind of like a Kinect to put your arms out and fly like a plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun because it's fun for the guest. It's fun for people watching the guest. That's the hallmark of a good one of these. They're often called location-based experiences, LBEs, and they can either be virtual, like a headset, like The Void is an LBE, but the ones in the queues at Disneyland, those are it has to be fun for everybody involved. It can't just be fun for one person, and that's really the big trick, right? Because video games is fun usually for one person, but not usually for, granted, the whole watching people now phenomenon, Twitch and all that has changed that mentality, which is, I find fascinating. I myself, partially because I am old, don't quite understand it. I would much rather play a game than watch it.
Yeah.
But hey, more power to, if you guys love doing that, there's nothing wrong with that. And so it's up to us as game designers to very strongly consider that whenever we're designing something. It has to be not only fun to play, but fun to watch.
I think I would agree. I'm still in the thing. I would rather play a game. For me, I think it's probably what is the reason why it's gotten so popular is that there are a lot of games and they're really expensive. And for me, like I don't know if I'll ever buy a PS5. Yeah. But if I watch an entertaining person play the game, I'll get to watch what the game is,
right? And
I'll be entertained by the person playing.
Sure, yeah.
And I think those are the people that get. It's more about the personality, to me at least, than the game itself.
Well, sometimes it's like some games are kind of hard. Like a lot of games, you have to have played for a long time. Just a first-person shooter. If you don't have that skill, it's hard to play. So, like Amber says, she likes watching because she's not able to play all the games because she's not terribly good at them. But she just likes watching them because she wants to see what happens in the game, but isn't maybe that good at it. So she likes watching.
So I love the visuals of Cuphead. I love that 1930s art style.
Beautiful animation.
And I tried playing it I had it on Steam, and Steam is not the platform for Cuphead. Its keyboard is terrible for it.
Yeah.
So when it came to PlayStation 4, I bought it, through Live, and I've been playing it again recently. I used to be I used to think I was good at playing games. That even the first boss level, I cannot beat the damn thing, and it's
so hard.
But that game was made hard. It's
sure,
so
yeah,
hard.
and that there's a term in gaming called masocore, which is like a masochistic hardcore game, right? That's what it stands for. And so these are games like Super Meat Boy and Dark Souls and stuff like that, right? And they're for a very specific audience. And don't get me wrong, not only I love Cuphead the game, but I love the guys. I love what they're doing. I would love to work with, what is it? MDHR is the name, the Moldhauer brothers.
Yeah.
I would love to work with those guys. That would be fantastic. But that said, I feel like it was a bit of a mistake to make the game as hard as it was, because the draw of that game is how beautiful it is, and you want people to see the whole game because you put in all that hard work. People they want to see it. I want to see every boss, every level in that game. I want to be able to enjoy how beautiful it is. But if I can't play it makes me mad, because I'm like, damn, is it me? Should I be better at this? Yeah. And then, of course, that's why I get why people watch the games. They're like, well, I'm not good at it. But I don't like the fact that if people want to try playing it and then it discourages them, I think that's a design mistake.
Yeah, there's a game called Celeste. Have you seen Celeste?
No, I have not. What is Celeste?
It's a platformer, and it's very hard, but it did a really good mix of letting you play through the story and then having things that you can do that challenge you, but you don't have to do to get through the story.
Right.
And I really like that because I was able to concentrate on the things when I wanted a challenge, but if I didn't want to, I could just keep playing and get the whole story.
Yeah, that's a great design decision. Let the player decide what is too hard and what is easy. I hate games that say, you're not doing very good. Would you like to go to easy mode? Because that's kind of insulting. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like this game Celeste does a good job of giving you that option, and so then you can go, well, maybe I'll try it. Maybe I feel up to the challenge. And then if you don't do as well at it, you're like, well, it was my choice, and all right, maybe it's not for me. I'll just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
I would be interested to see like the MDHR come out with a game in the same style, but more accessible and more story based rather than level based.
Yeah, as long as it isn't painted as like easy mode or baby mode, right. Or like it's still like if it's Cuphead the all accessible edition or something like that, right? And it just like dialed everything down. I think that people would really love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I'm not like, I don't mean Cuphead, but like a brand new game, even a Cuphead story, but like just to like make something that's like easily accessible and like so you get to, like you said, and make it more like cinematic, like you get to follow the story of these characters and not cinematic, that's what I meant, but story based.
Yeah. So so the mantra that I've always had, or eventually I learned it because I didn't have this at first, because when I first started as a game designer, I had a very adversarial relationship with the player. So if you play my first few games, which are Pac-Man World and Maximo, they are both very, very hard games, and intentionally so. Matter of fact, Maximo was even dialed down a lot because I did the first release of it. I ended up, because of a lot of things that happened, I ended up being the person who put pretty much every object into the game for Maximo. And so my first pass of it, I released it to the team, and I went, all right, I think I'm done with this. They all played it, and they all went, it's too hard. And so I added more coins, and I added more life ups, and I added more, I made dialed down the health of the bad guys and their reaction times. And then I released it again. I went, all right, here, you babies, here's the release. and then we released the game, and it was polarizing. People were either like, I hate this game because it's too hard, or I love this game because it was too hard. I jokingly say that I made Dark Souls before Dark Souls. But what it made me realize is that ultimately I wanted everybody to play the game because it meant sales. And I mean, this is the truth: is the game industry is a business, and so your goal is to make the best game you can, to sell it to people who then will be able to play it, enjoy it, and have such good feelings about it that the next thing you make they want to buy. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the creative. The truth about the creative cycle is that you are trying. If you want to make a living out of it, you have to do a certain amount of audience pleasing, because the goal is to keep working as a game designer. And I, not to once again, hashtag humble brag, but the fact that I've worked as a game designer for so long as I have, I feel like that's the answer. Like I've cracked the code, right? Like that's the answer. And so in Level Up, I write that the motto of a game designer should be love thy player, is that the game designer should be like a hand on the butt of a player, pushing them towards success, rather than smacking them down. The job of a game designer is not to make the player feel bad or that they have to I hate the term get good, right? Like I hate that, because it's not the player's responsibility to get good in order to finish the game. It's the game designer's responsibility to enable the player to be successful.
Yeah. And I think that's a philosophy that can be put towards any kind of game, right? Like, you want a game to be challenging, but you want the person playing to feel good about playing that game, whether it's tabletop or a video game.
Yeah, it's all a wish fulfillment, right? We play these games to be. There's three attributes that are about gaming. One is we either want to feel powerful, smart, or rich. Those are the three wishes that people have, right? I wish I was more powerful than I am. I wish I was smarter than I am. I wish I was richer than I am. And this is what video games do so well, is that it makes us feel rich, powerful, and smart. And so anything that takes away from that, from the player, is bad design.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I've noticed, like, I do Ghost Town Alive over at Knott's Berry Farm. Yeah, which is why.
We'll talk. Let's talk about that later, because I have some fun stories to talk to you about, not about Ghost Town, but about Legends of Frontierland.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we could talk about that right now, but that's one of the things that Ken is big on at Ghost Town Alive was let everybody play at their level. It's about them. Like, this isn't about you, the actor. It's about the people that are there and making them feel like they're the star of the show, and all about
enabling.
It was all like the number one rule was always affirm our guests. Like, every chance you get, right away, as soon as you see them, oh, thank God you're here. I really could use your help with this. Like, oh man, you look like a smart kid. Can you come help me? I really need your help. And like, they're always smarter. They're always stronger. They're always got better ideas than you. They always have the right way. Like, whatever it is right. And even if they say something we can't do, it's a great idea, but now we got to bring you back to something I can actually do with you, you know?
Right.
And I think that's a wonderful philosophy to have as a game designer. Like you said, I'm glad that you're preaching that, because that's excellent in anything, is you want the people to feel good about it.
Yeah, it's just a trap that I've seen. There's a few traps that game designers fall into, particularly when they're new. And like I said, because I teach, I'm dealing with a lot of, right out of the gate game designers. And so I see these mistakes being made over and over again. So my goal as an educator is, look, I've lived a life of game design. I've made mistakes, but you don't have to make those mistakes, because I'm here to tell you about them. All you have to do is remind yourself, is to pay attention, right? All they have to do is pay attention to what I'm saying, because these things I'm saying are true, because I have experienced them. Don't make the mistakes I've made. Let me be your testing ground, and now you're just going to have all good information, and then all you have to do is act on that good information.
Yeah. Was Sir Isaac Newton said, if I have achieved anything, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We're all, the creative process, anybody who, I don't know, I'm torn about the idea. Uniqueness is a commodity within games, particularly. Like, people will get very, they'll get very salty about games that are similar to other games. So, for example, speaking of Cuphead, I was showing my class a game that was on Kickstarter called Enchanted Portals. And it is essentially, it was for an inelegant term, it's considered by many to be a Cuphead ripoff. But then I said, well, what makes it a ripoff? And they're like, well, because the gameplay is similar. And I'm like, yeah, but there's other games that have similar gameplay. Cuphead wasn't anything new. It just took interesting ideas and put them all together. And that, in my opinion, is really the key to creativity, is synthesis. Yeah. You take things that like I don't know how academic we want to go, but we talk about the hero's journey, right? The Joseph Campbell hero's journey that everybody knows, right? Or at least anybody who's serious about studying story and things like that. But the hero's journey, the lesson from the hero's journey is that the same story is being told over and over again. So when I was in college, I did I was in a class taught by a teacher who was a student of Campbell's. So I am a second generation Campbell student. So I'm a big believer in that. That's I'm also a big believer in Harmon's Story Wheel, which is amazing. So if any of you are interested in narrative theory, do yourself a favor and go down that rabbit hole, because it's great. Anyway, so I had to do a term paper for this class. And so I compared The Wizard of Oz, Star Wars, Batman Dark Knight Returns, and I think The Hobbit, all to each other. And they're all the same story. Campbell is right. Of course he is. But I wanted to put it through this lens of like 20th century popular fiction. And so for me, it just doubled down on everything it has nothing to do with being new. It has everything to do with presenting things in a new light.
Right. I agree. And yeah, there's certain stories that we see, like the hero's journey and the story wheel, that it's just ingrained in us because of, speaking of Greek mythology, going back to the stories of Greek mythology, a lot of those things stem from those stories of those gods and goddesses and the formulas basically of storytelling. And I mean, you just don't break away from that because it's just human nature. It's what we like. It's what we are ingrained, what we have ingrained in us, and what we go through as humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was going to say, as much as people go on and on about wanting something new, at the end of the day, we kind of just want the same old thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have a law for that, and that is what I call the 70-30 rule, which is people want 70% old stuff that they feel familiar with and 30% new stuff. So never go over 30%. Otherwise, people will not like it.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I like it. I like it.
That might explain the new Star Wars movies then.
Yeah, it does violate the 30. Well, particularly the number 8, right? Yeah. Number 8 is unfortunately violates the 70-30 rule.
Yeah. That's why people didn't
and a
like
lot
it.
of other rules as well.
Yeah. We're not going to hold it to that one rule.
Right.
And that is a whole other debate for another day.
Yeah.
We could for hours about it.
We could fill up the next few hours about Star Wars nerdery. That's another one of my favorite topics.
Let's come back and do that next time.
All right.
Yes. Next time
sure.
we'll have you on for Star Wars.
Oh yeah. Too bad we just missed Life Day. Too bad.
I know. Happy Life Day, everybody.
Happy Life Day.
No, that'll be great because I feel like you have the smart ideas about Star Wars and I have the dumb ones. So I can actually hear what a smart person sounds like talking about Star Wars.
It's not just about Star Wars, Brian. I'm just kidding.
You're not wrong.
What was I going to say? Oh, speaking of old stuff, you mentioned Legends of Frontierland, and I'm sure a lot of people.
So I was actually involved in the creation of that.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
And so just to give you a time frame, Disney buys Star Wars, speaking of Star Wars, in 2012, right? Is that when they bought?
Yeah.
So when we found out about
7 years
the purchase, what's that?
It only took them 7 years to ruin it.
It's not
Less when they started putting.
It's not ruined.
It's not. If you, at the very least, we got the Mandalorian and Rebels out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's true.
So no, I think Star Wars still has a lot of life. I'm actually a little delighted at how it's reinvigorated. As a lifelong Star Wars fan, as somebody who saw Star Wars on opening day in 1977 and has loved it literally since the moment I walked out of the movie theater, it has been very gratifying to see this Star Wars love kind of roll around again.
That's awesome.
Anyway, speaking of Star Wars, so when Disney purchased Lucas, we were like, oh my God, now we have the whole Star Wars universe to play with. We need to make attractions, right? So I was the division I worked in was R&D. So it's kind of the black arts of Imagineering. So this is where literally some of the most, the word genius gets thrown around a lot, but I actually worked with geniuses, like guys that invented things that Disney still hasn't made that would blow your mind. And every day I would walk into work and like I said, I would get a little lost. I'd be like, sorry, I'm late. But I would purposely I perfectly park at a certain spot in the parking lot. So that meant I had to use this certain door, which meant I had to pass through all these sound stages that had all these projects going on because I got to see everything that was going on. Right.
Awesome.
So when that happened, we were like, well, we have to do the cantina. The cantina is a must for anything Star Wars related. And so I was in on a real early meeting with a fella named Corey Rouse, who's one of those geniuses that I mentioned. That guy. And we had this meeting about like, well, what would be in the Star Wars cantina? And I was kind of the resident Star Wars nerd. So I was the one where, well, you have to meet aliens and you have to have, a grumpy guy serving you. And do we allow droids or not? Or I don't know. And so we were planning out all the ways that we were going to do things for this cantina. And Corey goes, I don't know how we're not going to be able to pull this off. We're going to have to build like a whole cantina and then run it and like play test it, bring people in. It's going to be a huge pain in the ass and a lot of expense even before we start getting data. What's another way that we could do this? And I forget if it's Corey or someone else who said, well, Star Wars is just the Wild West. Let's just do it in Frontierland. So they were like, well, that's a great idea. So we started to come up with, what could you do if you were a cowboy in Frontierland that mapped to what people in Star Wars would do, right? So we were like, well, you could go to the bar and you could get drinks. You could, if you're in the bar, then of course you'd have to play poker. And then, it's the West, so there's a jail cell, so you can lock people up in the jail, blah, blah, blah. So then we're having these fun conversations. And then all of a sudden, Iger says, well, we're not doing anything vintage Star Wars, original trilogy Star Wars. We're going to do everything about the new movie. And we all said, well, what's the new movie? Because nobody knew anything about it at that point. And he says, well, we can't talk about it yet. So all the kind of talk about Star Wars got put on hold, much to the dismay of all the Imagineers. There were a lot of other really cool projects that we were talking about. But anyway, then I got sick. And so I was out for 8 months. So by the time I got back, Frontierland had already, they had kicked it off and started it I think they started in May or June, and I got back to Disney around July. So they kept saying, well, we got to get Scott involved in this. Scott was there, he's a game designer. This is just a big game, role-playing game. Let's get Scott in. And they kept petitioning my boss. So my first boss was amazing. The guy who brought me in, he was one of the best guys I've ever worked with. My new boss, not so much. And he, for some reason, he was always trying his best to kind of keep me from having fun. I don't know why he had it in for me, but he did. So so these guys that I was working with, all my friends were working with Ken on this project. Ken had been brought because he had a theater background. And so all these game designers that were at Imagineering were working with him and running this every day at the park. And my friends were like, we got to bring Scott in. We got to bring Scott in. And they just kept saying, nope, 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 nope. So finally they kind of did a workaround and they said, well, Scott, how about you write some quests and you can just every day we'll give you kind of a download of who liked what, and then write some more quests towards whatever that is. So for about a month, I was involved with that project, just enough for me to put on my resume. But I went down and I play tested it a few times to see how it worked and saw what guests were responding to. And so I would sit back in my office in Glendale, wishing I was down in Anaheim, and I would write quests for the players during that summer where they would literally, for the first time in easily 40, 50 years, people gave a shit about Frontierland.
Yeah.
And
it's so true.
Yeah, and and we thought it was a huge success. And I later found out that the management said, I think the quote was, there will be no role playing at Disneyland. And now, of course, this is before Galaxy's Edge and all that. But so, this, of course, discouraged the creators, and Ken, I think, was probably one of them who was brokenhearted because of this. But smartly, he and some of the other guys went down to Knott's and said, well, screw Disney, let's do it at Knott's, which I've yet to do it at Knott's, but I would love to do it just to see what form it now takes.
If you come next summer, as long as we have it still, you'll see me in the bank.
Nice.
But I got to do Legends of Frontierland once.
Right.
I worked there at the time. I was in Adventureland at the time, and I had done the Adventureland playtest with the Jujus and all that stuff.
Yeah, I got all those.
I do too. For my money, that was the best play test I've ever done. I love Kevin. I love that group.
Kevin Lively.
Kevin Lively. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is he a friend of the show?
He isn't, but I know him because I was at Jungle for so long, and I've friends.
You should have him come on. He's probably got so many great stories.
Oh yeah, I should message him. Okay.
But I love that. I was the first day I play tested Frontierland. I also play tested Adventureland, and Adventureland, because I'm a stuff guy. I love things. I was like, oh my god, I got to get these Jujus are so gorgeous.
I bought them all.
It's like Ryan's Beautiful Piece, right? from Jumanji. Every single one of those are gorgeous. But I had so much fun playtesting both of them. But the irony was, at the end of the day, I was like, ooh, I kind of like Kevin's more. How can we make it more like this? You know, and that was always the weird thing about Imagineering, was because there was a lot of divisions. So, you know, Corey's group was R&D, Kevin's was Blue Sky. There sometimes was like a two-headed monster that doesn't talk to each other. And so that was like the perfect example of that, where they both had these amazing projects that were great for a variety of reasons. And if they had just like blended the two together into one thing, imagine how that would have been.
All right.
Yeah.
So then I have to ask, so why do you think it is now that we have a cantina that we can go and visit, but it's nothing like I want my little nerd heart for it to be? Like, I think, to me, is where it's disappointing.
I think that I haven't been there. So I've been to Galaxy's Edge twice. This was before Rise got put in. So I've not gotten to go on that yet, which is really that's what I'm living for through the pandemic. It has been my dream for my entire life to go on a Star Wars dark ride. Yeah. So I will survive. I've been locking myself up for the whole time. I literally have not gone outside since March, other than to walk my dog.
Worth it.
But that is what the dream is, to get that vaccine and then go on that ride. That's my goal.
Yeah.
But that said, I never got to go into the cantina because when I went, it was still pretty early on in the opening, and it was always packed. Which is, I think it's the victim of its own success, is that the cantina by its nature is meant to be an intimate setting. And so, you know, I don't know if any of you have been in there, but from my understanding, it's almost like a small window of time you get to be in there, right? Like a half hour or hour long time.
You don't get to enjoy it. It's just you go in, you have your drink, you have your little food, and you're kicked out.
Well, and that's part of the problem for Disney only selling alcohol in one place, and that's the place. So regardless of if you're a fan or not, people are there for the booze.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, they're catering to three different audiences. That's the problem. One is the drinkers. The second are the Star Wars fans, who just like, the drinkers want to stay there and drink. The Disneyland, the Star Wars fans want to stay there and be in Star Wars land. The Disneyland guests want to experience cool things. And so I think out of the three of them, the Disneyland fans are the most understanding about getting kicked out. But I think the Star Wars fans and the drinkers, they probably don't like that about that experience, because that's very different than what they're used to. Now, and that's the irony, right? Like Batuu, you can wander around all day. You don't ever have to leave Batuu once you get in there. You know, you can spend the whole day just hanging out. And I know people that used to do that. Like, they would go to, you know, a land that they loved, and they would just hang. Like, I've spent afternoons just hanging out in New Orleans Square because I love the vibe of the area. That's my favorite land. And so I understand that desire, and I feel that it's if I were them, I would have done what they did with the Millennium Falcon, which is one doorway, multiple installations.
Yeah.
Right?
Or just like one really big one.
Yeah, or three little ones, and then you just go, all right, you're going to Cantina A, you're going to Cantina, you know, you don't know this, you keep it in story, right?
Yeah.
But essentially, the door rotates, you know, a la Indiana Jones, and then they just enter the cantina, but it's got a capacity, and the cast member keeps a track of the capacity, so that way you can spend a couple of hours really marinating yourself in Star Wars. The way that really you should be able to. That's what's so great about the one in downtown LA, is that I think that one is, I mean, granted, I haven't been into the one in Disneyland, and I'm sure the food is great. I'm sure the atmosphere is great. But the one in LA, you can just hang out there all day.
Yeah.
Like a regular bar.
Yeah.
Yep, like a regular bar.
I have heard Ken's stories about the inception of Star Wars Land and about Legends of Frontierland, and one of the things that like you said, like you like more stuff, like you like to get things for the experience, and I think that's what Disney was playing towards, and I think they liked that. and I think they missed some of that with Star Wars Land, because they had the app, but it didn't give you anything, and it wasn't even emotional at all. It was just a data pad.
So I've been thinking a lot about the Galaxy's Edge app, particularly since I would have loved to have made it, and I didn't get the chance. I have 3 IP that are on my bucket list that I'd love to do things for. One is Haunted Mansion, one is Star Wars, and one is Batman. And I have unfortunately not been able to do any of them. I've always been thwarted for cancer or other things, but I will eventually do something with those. Something that I can put on my resume at least. I've been tangentially involved with a few things, but anyway. The thing about the Galaxy's Edge experience, I think the mistake, if I have any criticism of it, because I played it, it was okay. I didn't love it. And I think the mistake was that they didn't follow what was done in Harry Potter Land at Universal, which was they made it about a device that you bought in the park. So you go to Universal, you buy your wand. It's the special RFID enabled wand, which allows you to do the effects in the world. So if you've made that investment of $50, which is a lot for a not plastic, at least it's wood, I think. But a wooden wand, you want to get like the use out of it for the day, right? Like it becomes your accessory for the day. Kind of like wearing a Mickey Mouse hat, right? You wear that damn thing all day because you're like, well, I bought this, so I'm going to wear it. So you get to Universal and you have this thing that allows you to do magical things. And now you're like, oh, I did this one magical thing. Let me find another. Let me find another. Let me find another, right? It's typical quest-based, you need a map or something to help guide you around, right? But what's I think the strength of it, I mean, the effects are okay. They're, some are good, some of them are okay. The experience of walking around the park is amazing. It's such a beautifully designed space. But the real magic, pun intended, is that you're using this foreign device, this wand, to do things. And I think that if Galaxy's Edge had given you, like, even if it was that stupid lady shaver that Qui-Gon uses from Phantom Menace, even if it were that and you played the game using that, I think it would have been a much better experience. Because my phone, I carry this thing with me in my pocket at all times. It's not magical. It's the trick is how to make this magical, but the reality is ultimately it's not. Now, maybe if they you could buy a thing that would go over it, to make it look like something special, maybe that would be enough, right?
Or even like a Bluetooth enabled device, like you buy something that connects to your phone so that while you're watching on your phone, you're using the device to actually do the stuff.
Right. So you could still have the power of the screen. You could still have the power of browser-based data and a memory, like where you could earn experience and get achievements and things like that. But I think the biggest mistake was just them making it only this, because this isn't special anymore to us. We babies use this, right? Like this is right. And so that's that. If I were brought in, if Disney would ever hire me again, but probably not based on interviews like this, they probably have nothing.
They're not watching. It's fine.
But if they ever brought me in to go, hey Scott, could you fix the experience of Galaxy's Edge? That would be one of the first 2 things I would do.
Yeah, and to point out Reed's comment that, but doesn't the app also unlock the lore? I think that to me that was the coolest part of the app, is that the app was the only thing that really drew me in to the Star Wars experience, because that was the only way I felt really connected to what was around me. But to your effect, I was still disconnected because it was just happening on my phone.
Well, and they also you didn't know that coming in. You had to have prior knowledge of it. You couldn't just walk into the land and discover this.
Yeah. There's no tutorials. Well, all right, let me amend my statement. There are 3 things that I would change about that experience. and the second,
the longer we talk, the longer the list will get.
Yeah, I know. It's just the way it is. But yeah, there's nothing resembling a tutorial. Even the people. I even knew about the first time I went to Galaxy's Edge. I even knew about the experience because I'd, help make the infrastructure for it. And I was in the line for the Millennium Falcon, and I passed a QR code on a box, and I went, why do they have that? And then I went, oh shit, it's for the game. And then I like fumbled with my phone. I'm like, oh, now I got to download it. Like the time it took me to get everything loaded and ready to play, I was already like about to load on the ride. So I'm like, well, that was a waste. I'll have to go back and wait in a line again to do that. Do I want to do that? I don't know. Right. So I think that I totally get, that was my career at Disney, was to figure out how to make the lines better, but it still didn't work the way that it was supposed to, because it didn't account for that, people are going to be wide-eyed about what's going on in Disneyland. And if they don't have a knowledge or a reminder, I'm sure it's also on the map, but who the hell reads the map, right? You just look at the pictures.
Yeah.
It's like, who the hell reads the manual? There's a reason why there aren't game manuals anymore. Nobody read them,
Yeah, that's true.
Plus, a lot of the stuff then conflicts with the operation, because like Imagineers will create these beautiful things, and then operations will be like, oh, well, it's slowing things down, so they cut them.
Yeah.
Like in the Millennium Falcon ride, there was that whole moment with that big engine where you hear voices and all this stuff would happen, and after a while, they just cut it.
They did?
It wasn't moving the line fast enough. Yeah.
Yeah, people were stopping to listen to it.
Nope.
That's so dumb.
Yeah, and it sucked.
Yeah. Well, what's even worse was my first experience for the Millennium Falcon was it was an overflow day. So they brought me out into the kind of that back lot where those giant cargo containers are.
Yeah.
And the problem is, you look at the spires, and unfortunately, because they were, they had a limited budget and they were trying to get it done, the spires, many of them were undone on the back, and you could see like chicken wire.
Yeah.
And it's what they in Imagineering call bad show, right?
Yeah.
It takes you right out of the show, and between the giant cargo containers, which didn't feel as Star Warsy to me. And because they're real world items that now are being put in this fantasy world, and the fact that I could see the chicken wire, I just was like, oh man, you should have been there that day. I was on a tear. My critical Imagineer was in high gear that day.
Yep.
I was taking pictures and sending them to people that I knew worked at the park and going, what the hell is this? And, and I wasn't even working for Disney anymore at that point, and they probably ignored me, but still.
But I've heard that space that with all the containers that you were in is, of course, it's an extended queue because they needed the space. But I heard that originally in the original designs was Oga's Cantina, that whole area. But they had to shrink things down because of budget. So I think so to your point earlier, I think there was an idea to make it bigger and grander and fit more people or what have you, but because of things the way they are, they just cut.
Yeah. I think the big thing that, like, Star Wars Land, they had a lot of really great ideas, and most of them they didn't buy into it all the way, and that's why it wasn't as successful as they wanted it to be. They tried to bring in the story aspect into the land, and they didn't go all the way, so it kind of fell flat. They've tried to make the cantina feel like a Star Wars cantina, but they couldn't go all the way because of budget, because of they needed to bring in people as quickly as possible. So it doesn't feel the way it is. The queue, they cut things in the queue because they put efficiency over show, things like that. I think that's a big lesson.
How does Disney ever have to worry about budget? That sounds like a lie. No, man, you have no idea.
They do. I mean,
they do a lot.
The story. So my story because I didn't understand that either, right? I was like, well, we got more money than God, right? Of course, it's all spread out and blah blah blah. But it really comes down to this. There's another one of the geniuses that I worked with is a fellow named Dave Durham, and he was at Imagineering for many years. And when I was working on this kind of like, making the queues better project, I went to him and I said, hey, I've got this really great idea for what we could do in the queue for Space Mountain. And I pitched him the idea. And at the end of it, he said, okay, let me ask you a question, Scott. Would you rather use the money for the queue for Space Mountain, or would you rather improve the ride experience? And my immediate answer was, well, I'd rather have a better ride. But afterwards, after I had and he said, well, that's why we don't, that's why we're not doing this, right? Like that money is going to the ride. But later I kind of walked out and had a few days to think on it. And I realized, no, I should have fought for my line. I should have said, look, if you don't have a good line experience, it's not going to matter whether the ride is good or not, because the line is make it part of the experience. And so I, on one hand, I kind of disagree. I get it. I get where they're coming from, but I don't always agree with it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, they're a business, right? So they want to make money, and they're not going to make the money if they keep spending it on things. But it's unfortunate because we think that they should spend the money so we have a better experience.
But what are they saving that money for, Chunk?
Not the two pockets of rich people.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right.
Yeah,
So,
which sucks.
I mean, I'm not saying those guys don't deserve that money. I mean, when I worked for Iger was one of the most inspiring bosses I've ever had. I mean, I didn't really work with him directly, but every time he talked and I was in the room, he always said something smart. He always was very inspiring. So, and that guy deserved the success that he got, right? So I'm not going to say anything bad about it. I think he deserves his money, although it is a lot more. It was way more money than I'll ever get working for Disney, right? Yeah. Even if I get into the park for free, which I don't get into anymore. So if anybody wants to throw some passes my way eventually, once this is all over, I'll take them.
Same. Well, Scott, we've kept you a long time, and I really am grateful for you to be on the show because you have some amazing stories and have done a lot of amazing things. And I'm very, very happy to have you on the show, and I will happily have you back on the show. We will happily have you back on the show, especially to talk more about Star Wars. I got a whole list of things we could talk about if you ever need prompts. Yes. So, and we'll have to have Chunk, Brian, and Cucumber back for the Star Wars talk I know all of us would want to get in on it.
Oh yeah, that would be fun. I know Cucumber would particularly love it.
Yes.
Before we go, Scott, do you wanna let us know anything we can help support?
Sure.
Games or something.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got a list of them. How long do I have?
Yeah.
Whatever you need.
All right. So if you want to find me online, because I love to socialize, you can either find me on Twitter or Instagram at Mighty Bedbug is my Twitter handle. I'm also all over Facebook, so you can reach out and friend me that way. I know Facebook is horrible, but I still like it as a social platform. So
whatever.
If you want to support my products, my two books are Level Up: The Guide to Great Video Game Design. That's available on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. The second book is called Swipe This, and it's about touchscreen game design. So if you're interested in making mobile games, that's the second book. It needs more reviews, though. Level Up is doing fine, but Swipe This needs more love. So if you're into mobile gaming, buy it, read it, enjoy it. Enjoy the poetry that's in it and the chili. Oh, no, there's no chili. There's something else, some other recipe, I think, maybe. Anyway. And then I have a couple of board games. The first is called Ray Guns and Rocket Ships. That you can still, it's technically out of print, I think, but you can still find copies of it on Amazon and eBay. My second game is called Pantone the Game. It's a party game. That's still available through, wherever games are sold.
And we've played both of them, and we really like them.
Oh, yeah. It was fun to play with you guys. I had a really great time. We'll do it again. I have some new ones coming out next year, but I can't quite talk about them yet, so I'll just hold off. I am in a movie called Game Master that came out this July. So if you want to see more of me talking about games and making games, and it's a really wonderfully made movie. There's tons of really talented people. There's this essentially the story of about 5 game designers, myself included, and they all have fascinating stories. So if you like board games, or even if you don't and you want to learn more about board games, I highly recommend it. And then I know times are very trying, so I only ask this with trepidation, but I do have a Patreon at Scott Rogers Designer, where I talk mostly about board game design. I show behind the scenes. I'm kind of infamous for carrying around a sketchbook with me wherever I go, so I share the ideas and images from those. I talk about games that I like. I do make videos, but most importantly, every month I make a print and play game. So it's essential. Right now they're exclusive, although I think I'm gonna probably put some of them up on the Game Crafter for people to buy. But the Patreon levels are pretty low. I think it's like $2, $5, and $10. So if you have a few extra dollars and you want to help a struggling game designer make prototypes, or I should say afford prototypes, I always appreciate having new Patreons. And
Awesome.
I think that's everything and my podcast, Ludology, and Fillory and Father. Listen to those if you want to hear more of my voice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank
That's
you so much
so
for
cool.
joining us, Scott. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
cool.
there's a lot that I'd still love to pick your brain about. So we'll definitely have to have you on at some point again.
Yeah. So I've done a lot. I look good on paper. My resume is good.
You look good in person too, Scott.
Well, fortunately, I'm not the furriest one here, so that's
Hey.
That's right. You'll never have to worry about that with the perception.
awesome.
Well, again,
thanks guys for having me. It's such a pleasure and a delight to meet the new ones and to chat with the ones I already know. And this is I love you guys. I love your show. I love what you're doing. You're spreading positivity out into the world, and that is a fantastic thing and much needed.
thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
That means a lot. We're always looking for new things to do and stuff too. So we'll be in touch. But yeah, thanks again for hanging out. Everybody, please support Scott and all the things he does. At the very least, listen to his shows and follow him on the socials. But thanks for stopping by. And maybe next time we'll have you on, we'll do a little bit of Dr. Know-It-All, but I think an hour and a half is long enough.
And, just so you guys know,
You already have this. You already have this know-it-all, so you don't need Dr. Know-It-All.
we'll see you guys back here tomorrow at 2:00 for Exhausted Debaters. There's no Doom Club today, so we'll see you guys tomorrow. And Trash Trapeze as well at 7:30 p.m.
Yeah. Are we raiding anybody?
Yeah, we're gonna raid Wormwood Gaming. They're just
Oh, sweet.
Wormwood.
Show Wormwood some love, guys. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Stay safe.
Bye.